All right, well, welcome everybody. Jackie, hopefully you can also, your video and everything is working okay too. Tonight we are talking about putting your garden to bed for the winter. We have Jackie Riffice with us this evening, who many of you probably know from previous webinars. We've had her in libraries and doing any number of different random projects for us over the years involving gardens. So we're super happy to have Jackie back tonight. We're super happy that she never fully retires, so we can keep pulling her in as well. Just to let everybody know, we are recording this evening and you can access our recording after tonight. So if you miss anything, don't worry about it. We'll have it up on our Facebook and on our website. If you register this evening, we'll also be able to email you a link of tonight's webinar. We will do Q&A at the very end of the webinar as well. You'll notice at the bottom of your screen, we've got a little Q&A box. Don't put anything into the chat. We're not going to check the chat. I'm not sure if you're even able to use the chat, but Q&A you can use. And we encourage you to, anything that comes up, she's going to go through a lot of great stuff, but she's wonderful at answering questions at the end as well. So Jackie will speak tonight again about putting your garden to bed for the winter. She'll speak for about 45 minutes and then we'll have 15 minutes at the end for questions, or, we'll wrap up about 7 o'clock. That's how we're going to do it. Just a little reminder, we only have 1 week left if you want to nominate people for the Treehouse Awards. This is large or small projects that you've done on Chicago bungalows. We, serve people who are in all kinds of vintage homes, but for the Treehouse Awards, it's only a Chicago Bungalow Award program. So if you do have a Chicago bungalow, then we highly encourage you to check out our website. There's a link right on our homepage for it. We've been doing this for years and years. You can see previous projects and stuff as well and see the kinds of things that have passed through in the end. Yeah, so I think that's about it for the basics. Again, questions at the end. So just hang tight until about 45 minutes in, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. But I wanted to introduce Jackie Riffice as well. Jackie Riffice discovered gardening over 40 years ago, and along the way founded Prairie Godmothers, a little experiment that taught folks how to save the planet by living and gardening greener. Jackie put Prairie Godmothers to bed a few years ago, but continues to help out when a call comes in. Jackie recently retired from her professional life as a project manager and is now living her best life as a community volunteer, of which she does a lot. She can be found supporting various efforts in her hometown of Flossmoor, conducting tours in the Lurie Gardens in Chicago, and creating artwork in her home studio. Jackie is a master gardener and a master naturalist and has had a very long history with the Chicago Bungalow Association. She's always happy for the opportunity to work with the bungalow team and their members. And she has done lots and lots of that over the years for us. Jackie, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and turn your video on.
I can't turn the video on, but I can try to share my screen.
Okay. Yeah, there seems to be something going on where video is being a little stubborn tonight. But yeah, let's get your screen up. We'll figure that out.
What we can do here.
Perfect.
So start my video.
All right.
Let's see if that is.
Oh, there you are.
Okay.
Hey. All right. So I will hide my video.
You hear me and you can see me, I hope.
Yep. Everything is great. Yep.
So,
I'm going to go ahead and mute myself.
Okay, got it. Well, we're going to talk about getting your garden put to bed for the fall and winter. I call this one a long winter's nap. I've had a long history with the Chicago Bungalow Association, and I'm really happy for the opportunity to talk to you tonight. And over the years, I've found some pen pals that are bungalow and historic home owners. So I just want you to know, if you're on this seminar tonight, that's great. If any of you have questions, you can always reach me by phone or by email. So I'm glad to be here with you. Let's see. Why can't I move?
I think okay.
There we go. Got it. So there's a routine that we gardeners follow year after year after year to get our gardens ready. We want to make sure the gardens are weeded and deadheaded. We divide and relocate plants that need a bit more room. We plant bulbs or we remove bulbs, and then we put a final little warm top coat on it for the winter. We make sure that this is done every year, but for me, every few years, my cleanup is a bit more extreme, and this is the year. So I want to show you what I'm doing this season. I have 7 garden spaces that need what I call an extreme fall cleanup, a little bit of restyling, and a bit of mulch. And so this year, my gardens are going to get a deep clean and a short haircut. It's been a few years since I've raked out all the leaves that have collected at the base of each plant. So I'll weed and cut back those plants to a height of 6 inches. This season, everything is getting a haircut once the weather turns. Some of my plants are due for relocation and dividing. I lost a 60-year-old maple tree this year, so the plants that were shaded by that wonderful plant tree are now in full sun. So I have to do a little moving around of those guys. And then I have some bare spots that I want to fill in. So we'll talk a little bit about how to divide and how to plant some new things. I also want to improve my soil this year by adding a few inches of mulch or compost in every bed. I put down 3 inches of mulch and I do it every 3 or 4 years. And again, this is the year. The other thing is that I don't want to spend a whole lot of money this year. I'm on a budget. As Carla said, I'm recently retired, so I'm a little nervous about not getting a paycheck. So I have budgeted enough just to do my own garden cleanup and then hire a small crew to put the mulch down. I'm just getting started with my gardening, and so I'm going to walk you through some of the steps that I've taken so you can see where we are. What you're looking at right now is my pollinator garden. The list of plants, this is a list of plants that you might have in your pollinator garden. And these are plants that this time of year can be cut back or deadheaded. And for you new gardens, deadheading means taking off the top of the plant to give it an opportunity next season to bloom. The plant names that are in green on this page are those that are in my garden. You have to cut back plants this time of year that are candidates for fungal diseases, mildew, foliage damage, and often those things fall to black-eyed Susans, hostas, irises, monarda or bee balm, phlox, and yarrow. When I cut my plants back, I leave about 6 inches of the plant standing. And if it's a fan-like plant, like a daylily or an iris, I leave 3 to 6 fans. When I cut back, I'll also lightly till around the soil so that I want to loosen it up a little bit and make sure that the soil isn't compacted. And one of the things that I'll share is when you cut back things and you have a plant that's diseased in some way, don't throw it in your compost bin so that it gets mixed up with your other plants. This is a close example of what I mean by cutting back plants and then tilling the soil. If you look real closely at the picture on the left, that's my bee balm or monarda, same thing, and it has a powdery mildew on it. Very common for monarda. This happens to be native monarda, and it's again very common. So what I did is cut everything back. And as you can see on the picture on the right, I cut it down all the way to the ground and tilled the soil just a little bit so that the area looks really clean. I will do this throughout my garden so that when it's time to mulch, we'll have bare bones in my garden spaces. After I cut back all my plants, and this was just an example, I moved on to my raised vegetable beds. My vegetable garden was awful this year, terrible, just absolutely terrible. I planted 4 tomato plants, 4 specialty peppers, some zucchini and cucumbers, and then there were some visitors from previous years. As you can tell, you see sunflowers there, and then there's a big knot of gourds called Jack B. Little pumpkins that were visitors. I didn't plant them, but they showed up. The vining pumpkins exploded all over my tomatoes and my peppers, and so nobody got any sun. And the happiest plants in this garden were my sunflowers and my mints. And you know how mint goes, it grows pretty much anywhere. So my total yield from my vegetable garden this year was a basket of tomatoes, a small basket of peppers, 3 zucchini, no cucumbers, and enough sunflower seeds to feed every squirrel in the neighborhood. And I have 2 raised beds that I'll show you what I did with. Last week, in preparation for this, I removed all the plants from those beds. I saved the mint. I dug the mint up and I collared it. You've heard me talk about collaring plants before. It's putting a plant in a plastic container with the bottom cut out. This allows for the plant to root, but not to spread and take over, as you know, mint can do, as well as chives and onions. Then I combined some garden soil, some compost, and shredded scrap paper, and I mixed it together for a cocktail of amended soil. I'll take old paper or newspaper because it decomposes easily and adds a little bulk to my soil. I mixed it all together and placed it on top of the raised bed. I tilled it about 3 to 4 inches deep, and then I put a top coat of mulch on it. Now these beds are ready for winter, and this is what a small picture of what my gardens will look like as I get through the winter months and cut back everything in the garden. And one more thing, while I was at it, you know how gardening goes. You start something and then you wind up being outside for the whole day. While I was at it, it had rained for a few days, so I know my soil was easy to work with and pliable. So I took the time to reset my wine bottle border that had fallen into disrepair. This is a garden that has some native plants as well as lilies of the valley. So I took time to cut back the lilies as well. And then I reset 132 wine bottles for my border, and I'm back in business. And no, I don't drink wine, but I have lots of friends that do, thus all of the wine bottles. So while I was there, I fixed this garden space so that it's in place and ready for next year. Here's a list of plants that can be divided in the fall. The ones in green are the ones that are in this bed that you're looking at. This is directly behind my house, and until I lost my maple tree, it was a full shade garden, filled with astilbe, coral bells, hostas, peonies, phlox, Siberian iris, and veronica. Some of these plants need to be divided this season. Some need to find a new home. And so I'm going to show you a little bit about how I addressed that. There are 2 methods to divide plants, and the method I use depends on the plant, the size of the plant, and if I want to downsize it or move it. There's the lift and split method and what I call pop and drop. The lift and split method is good for smaller, more delicate plants, while the pop and drop is good for plants that have tangled root balls like ferns or hostas. The plants that I want to divide this year include irises, lilies of the valley, astilbe, hosta, and peonies. And you will note that most of those are shade plants. For the iris, lily, and peony, I'm going to use the lift and split method. I'm going to simply lift the plants out of the ground with a pitchfork and then split them by shaking loose their roots, as you can see in the bottom picture on the left. I want to make sure the roots are void of any excess soil, and that allows me to sort them out and bundle them up to put into a new space. The only thing I'd caution is if you're working with peonies, you want to make sure you have 3 to 6 eyes in the root before you plant it. And if you're familiar with peonies, when you dig up the root ball, there's these little bumps on them that are called eyes, and you want to make sure you bundle them into groups of 3 to 6. I'm going to pop and drop my astilbe and hosta. These guys need to be completely relocated because I lost my shade. So I'm going to pop my shovel into a portion of the plant. I'm going to leave part of the hosta there. I'm going to leave part of the astilbe there. And then I'm going to cut away the rest and then drop it in a new space. Hostas and astilbes are quite hardy, and splitting this way won't really harm them. I'll move the divided plants to fill in some voids, and this is the time of year when you offer to share your plants with your friends and neighbors. I do have some bare spots in my garden, but they're going to stay bare because I'm on a budget, and we're just going to make sure it looks neat and tidy and worry about filling those spaces in another time. But if you want to add plants, this is a good time of year to add new plants. If you go to your local garden center or nursery, if you can find plants you like, they're usually at a great price. And so it's a good time to buy and put them in the ground. But remember that when you lift and split or pop and drop, you still need to water those plants for at least 2 weeks after you get them in the ground, and perhaps longer, depending on the weather. I don't have any bulbs this year. You know, I'm on a budget. But when I do plant them, I make sure to sprinkle cayenne pepper near the bulb to deter rabbits and squirrels. They don't like the taste, and they'll stay away for a period of time. I don't have summer bulbs to dig up, but if I did, I would shake off the soil and put them in a bag that breathes, a net bag, a brown paper bag, something like that, and leave them in a cool place for the winter. If you want to put bulbs in the ground, these are some great bulbs for spring color: allium, camassia, crocus, daffodil, squill, tulips, and I tell you, my favorite that I make sure that I plant, make sure that I take care of every year are daffodils. Daffodils, both in my suburban home and in your city home, are really hardy. They naturalize, they last longer than tulips, and they add some really great color to your yard. If you have cannas or dahlias or elephant ears, once the weather starts to cool, you're going to want to dig those guys out and make sure they stay cool for the rest of the year. And then the final touch is adding a top coat of mulch. You can add mulch any time of year. You can do it at the beginning of the season, throughout the season, and toward the end. And someone asked me the other day why I'm going to put really good mulch on in my gardens, only for it to be covered with snow. That's because I want to protect my roots. And as you know, I'm cutting everything back since I'm doing some extreme work. I want to put the mulch down now. So I'm going to select natural hardwood mulch. It helps me maintain an even ground temperature and provides a finished look to the garden. I stay away from colored mulch because those colors leach in the soil, into the soil. And I stay away from cypress mulch, which unfortunately is probably the cheapest mulch that's out there, but it is harvested from our Gulf state areas, and it contributes to eroding the shoreline. So I don't do that as well. Mulch gives you a nice finished look. Instead of mulch, you can also add compost as a top coat. That's a really great amendment. It's a slow release soil booster that works over the course of the winter. For compost, if you don't want to purchase any, you can add chopped leaves and grass clippings into your soil, along with shredded newspaper, and work that into the top 3 or 4 inches of your garden. This is also the time of year to protect your tools, and the best tools in my tool shed are my oldest tools. They're made well, and I take good care of them. So when my season is over, I'll clean and chip the soil and dirt off the tools and wipe them down. I'll take fine steel wool and I'll remove the rust if there's any rust on any of the tools. I'll use a small file to sharpen some of the edges, and for those clippers or hori knives that need a really sharp end to them, I will bring them to a local guy who does that for me. I'll rub the entire tool with a thin coat of mineral oil or motor oil, and it's good to go for next year. I check to make sure the handles don't have splinters. And if they do, I sand them. And then I also wrap a piece of duct tape in a bright color around the handle of most all of my tools. That makes it, number one, easy for me to find it in the garden, and number two, easy for me to identify when I loan my tools to neighbors. If you don't have a place to hang your tools, you can do this nice little hack that seems to work really well. You can fill a bucket with sand and fill it with fresh sand, and then add a quart of clean motor oil into it and mix it up. That way you can store your garden tools right in the oily sand and leave them in a cool garage, basement, or shed. And I've done that. It works really well. I've been talking, quite a bit about being on a budget. I'm a pretty quick gardener, so what I'm thinking is it's going to take me maybe 4 hours per garden space. I have 7 garden spaces, so that's 28 hours over a period of time. And all that really is going to cost me is a bottle of Advil for all the aches and pains that I might get after all that work. I'm going to order 7 yards of hardwood mulch. When you order mulch from a local company that supplies mulch, it's much less expensive than buying it by the bag at your big box. And so I can get really great hardwood mulch at $25 a yard. In some places you can get it less, and 7 yards is going to cost me a little bit of money. And then because I am full of bionic parts these days, I have a new hip, an old hip, a new knee, and pretty bad shoulders. So I've budgeted for 3 local kids who've done this for me before. I'm going to bring them in for a couple hours, and then pay them, and also have pizza on hand so that they can get my mulch laid. When we talk about mulch, I don't know that I've mentioned it, but I like to add 3 to 4 inches of mulch in my spaces. And if you're not sure how much mulch you need, you're just go to your to the internet or your phone and look for a mulch calculator. And if you tell it how many square feet you have and how deep you want your mulch or your compost, it will give you that information. So what I will in essence do, and what I've started, is to actually take everything down in my garden this winter. And what that means is I won't have any seed heads for birds. I won't have any hiding places for some of the little critters that often hide, and that would include solitary bees and wasps and things like that. And so once I cut all that down, I wonder how we'll be able to attract wildlife back to my yard. And so I have a couple ideas for you to consider to make sure that your yard, your property, remains a winter wonderland. So in my backyard, wintering birds, need food, and they need water, and they need a home. So my bird feeder, I have 2. They're filled with black oil sunflower seeds and white millet. There's all sorts of combinations you can get, but those are my preferred seeds. Black oil sunflower seed attracts cardinals, chickadees, finches, sparrows, blue jays, woodpeckers, you name them. They all like sunflower seeds, and they'll eat white millet. But the good part about that is squirrels do not like white millet. So I'm really trying to feed the birds and not feed the squirrels. I have another place in my yard far away from the bird feeders where I leave out nuts for the squirrels to munch on. I also keep 2 bird baths close to the house with heaters. Bird baths are gathering places for birds all through the day, and you'll notice them especially after breakfast and after dinner. I have a few bird houses that I leave up over the winter months. There are non-migratory birds who need a place to stay, like wrens, chickadees, and sparrows. So later this month, I will disassemble my birdhouses, clean them out, and they'll be like new for new tenants over the course of the winter. And if you don't do any of that in your house and your property, one of the things I'd recommend is finding birds in our area where they do have food and water and places to stay. And I've listed here some really great birding sites recommended by the Chicago Audubon Society. And if you're in the city, you're going to find something close in Jackson Harbor or on Montrose Point or Northerly Island. If you live south of the city, Wolf Lake is a great place. They have a beautiful sanctuary there. If you want to go more north, look to Wilmette or Glencoe, because there are places there. And then if you're out south by me and want to take a trip even farther south, you can go into Bourbonnais, where there is the Prairie Farm. And these were all highly recommended by the Audubon Society. So if you don't have birds in your backyard, but want to do some birding, take a look at these places. I think I might have mentioned bugs, but another winter wonder at my house that will go away is I've cut everything back. So where are those solitary bees and wasps and beetles and ladybugs going to go all winter? Well, at my house, they can go into what we call a bug hotel. And here are 2 examples of bug hotels that I have on my property. Bug hotels provide shelter and nesting sites to native and migratory solitary insects. And they're important to protect over the winter because they are vulnerable pollinators and they do attract beneficial insects. And so on the picture on the left, you'll see bamboo canes, some pieces of wheat, wood chips, logs, and twigs. And it's just a small square case where you just put those things in there, and you can hang them in your garden or put them in an area where these bugs will have access. The one on the right is it's not really a bug hotel, it's like a bug condominium, because my husband built this for me. It stands about 3 feet tall and almost as wide, and it's got 2 sides to it. And so what you'll see are lots of organics in there. There's wood, there are pieces of wood where we've drilled holes, there's moss and different kinds of grasses, and a lot of pine cones, lots of twigs. And this is where the solitary bugs that I want to keep safe all winter will find a spot. So my gardens are all cut back. They're all covered with a nice top coat of mulch. Everything is looking kind of dismal, if you will. And so I want to add a little bit of color to my garden spaces. So just because you're getting ready to put your garden to bed doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stop your winter landscape. And so these are just 2 examples of porch and window displays that are organic, meaning you can find the ingredients anywhere, and they add color to your property during the cold months. All of this stuff can be free when you walk through your neighborhood, walk through an environmental park of some sort, or actually when you go to your local nursery or big box and they're cutting back Christmas trees. You can find lots of things like that. And it's really nice just to add a little bit of color over these months once you cut everything back. So Carla, we're getting ready to finish up. Actually, I think I talked really fast. We might have time for questions if there are any. But as we kind of close this out, if you're a gardener, you already know what to do. And these are just some ideas, but you want to make sure you pretty much do all of this. You want to get your garden weeded. That's one of the most important things before winter comes in, because weeds do survive over the winter. And the best thing you can do for your garden to ensure a good health come spring is to make sure you get those weeds out of there. I don't use weed killer. I just pull everything out by hand, and I try to dig the roots out as deep as I can, and then cultivate the soil. So everybody has their own remedy. I would just caution you from doing what I hear some people doing that is absolutely terrible for your soil. You don't ever want to kill your weeds with bleach or any sort of toxic chemical like that. This is the time of year that if you have plants that are really big, this is when you can really split them up and move them about. It's not necessary this year because they'll still be there in the spring. And if you think they need more space or need to be moved about, you can do that in the spring. But this is actually a good time of year to do it. You may have bulbs you want to put in. There are lots of really great mail order bulb companies out there. And if you decide to plant bulbs, think about this. Do your research on your bulbs, because daffodils are blooms that can bloom early, mid, or late season. And if you do it just right, you'll have daffodils blooming from March all the way through the end of May, like I do at my house. If you're big on cannas or elephant ears, get them out as soon as the weather starts to get really, really cold. I'm cutting everything back in my garden. You don't need to cut everything back in your garden, but you really do need to deadhead to make sure those plants that are susceptible to mildew or mold or some sort of disease are gone. Put a top coat in place if you can. Again, not necessary this time of year, but if you want to protect your root system and protect your plants, make sure you get a good top coat in place sometime during the year. And if you get 3 or 4 inches worth and distribute it right, it'll last you 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years before you need to replace it. And for me, what I just talked about, my budget really isn't stretched. So I've made room to pay for some of this labor, but I'm happiest in the garden, so I'm going to take my time and get all of these things done over the next several weeks. The first frost in our area, suburban Chicago and the city of Chicago, is scheduled to be about October 6th, and the last frost is November 4th. So you really have almost 30 days to get this work done. So those of you that live in bungalows, for the most part, have more postage size lots that you have to address unless you have a lot right next door. But they're generally smaller, so you'll be able to do that. And if it's a larger piece of property, just make sure you're managing your time so that you can get all of this done before the freeze hits. So before I close, this is my email address, and I am absolutely, I just have a crush on all you on the Chicago Bungalow Association. So I am always glad to answer your questions anytime. You can reach me at my email, and if you want a phone call, just let me know that as well. So Carla, that brings an end to getting your garden ready for a long winter's nap. I know you are going to be able to share this with the Bungalow folks. I'm going to stop the share and right.
Sure. Yep.
And then I don't know, do you have any questions that I might?
Yeah, we've got some questions for you. Also, I love this presentation. For some reason, the cleaning and storing tools thing is like my favorite part. That, and then I don't remember if you showed the bug hotel before, or if that was a newer slide.
You know what, I probably didn't, because number one, my gardens are gonna be very sad looking, you know, covered with this nice warm blanket of mulch. And I've really never shared the bug hotel because I had plenty of sustenance for bugs by not taking my things down. The larger bug hotel was inspiring to me because I saw a version of it at the Lincoln Park Zoo.
Yeah.
So next time you walk through the Lincoln Park Zoo, you'll see a bug condominium very similar to what I have.
Well, I love them. I made Mason bee houses way back in the day for a couple workshops, and it just made me so happy.
Yep.
So that was a good one. There's always something new, and also the budget stuff and calculating labor time. I thought that was really interesting. So yeah, let's get into these questions. One person asked about, you know, should you leave the seed heads for migrating and overwintering birds?
The answer is yes. This year I will not, because of the reasons I explained. But when you leave heads from black or brown-eyed Susans and coneflowers especially, they really like that. My mountain mint and my Monarda have really good seed heads that normally I would leave up, but this year both are susceptible to a mold, a sooty mold, so they're coming down.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's great. There's nothing better than seeing a little goldfinch perched on top of your coneflower.
Yeah. Should we worry about bleach in paper or ink from newspapers when using shredded paper and when a garden is going to be used for food?
Not necessarily. The inks that they use nowadays, they're using soy-based inks, but it's so minuscule that it doesn't seem to have a negative effect on the soil in my research. Now, let me just preface that by saying, if you ask 4 gardeners the same question, you'll get 4 different answers, and they will all be right. So that's what I stick. That's what I stick.
It's hard to hold all those truths, but we can do it. Are there any types of, I know you got into this a bit, but if you want to do a little recap, and maybe you have some additional things, are there any types of plants that are better or worse to plant this time of year? And they asked about perennials only. If there are, like, should you only be planting perennials?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, of course, annuals, annuals are those that will last as you get closer to winter, maybe begonias and things like that, but annuals are such that they only last a season. Perennials are what you want to plant this year, and there are really no tender perennials right now, but planting is good. As a matter of fact, one of the premier native perennial farms called Possibility Place, it's located in Monee, Illinois, is having a pop-up this weekend. So they're selling their plants. So this is a good time to get good plants to go in the ground.
Excellent. We had someone recommend wiping the handles of your tools down with boiled linseed oil and allowing them to dry just to keep them in good condition as well.
That's a good suggestion for me. It's a little messy, so I've actually used olive oil. I'm Italian. I've used olive oil and
with you.
Things like
Good
that.
for everything, really. Yeah. I mean, anything. It cures it. I swear, it's like the best. Do you have any recommendations on how and when, in terms of time of year, to remove large, deep-rooted weeds from my yard? That was interesting.
Oh,
yeah.
So
maybe not when it's frozen.
Well, so a large deep-rooted weed, to my mind, is something like a pokeweed, which is a beautiful tall weed that has beautiful berries on it that birds eat and then poop all over and make things a mess. I would say there's no better time or bad time to dig out a weed. My recommendation would be, if you want to get deep roots or tap roots, wait till the ground is a little bit loose after a heavy rain and go after it that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Somebody else recommended, so that the Chicago Botanic Garden recommended the Mulch Center to him, and said they were an excellent supplier, including delivery.
Yep, great.
Um,
There's also a place on the south side of the city called Easy Tree Recycling, and they have mulch, and they actually have compost that looks just like mulch, and their pricing is good as well for those folks that are on the south side.
Great, good to know. Good to know. Is there a way to keep ice from forming in bird baths other than filling it with vodka?
I use bird heaters. I use heaters, and you can purchase them. I have two different kinds. I have one that looks like a heavy metal kind of bolt that I use to plug in, and then I bought something different last year that just looks like a flat frisbee, and they both work. The heavy metal one was pricey, in the 40s, I think, when I bought it, and the flat disc was probably under $20, and they're both effective.
And you put them directly into the bath, not, yeah.
Yep, directly into the water. Yep.
Huh. Are they battery powered? How do those, like?
Electric, they're electric. So
So
I
you
have
run
outlets. Yep.
Okay.
I run them to outlets.
Interesting. Okay. You can tell I don't have any bird baths. So, what winter vegetables can we plant now?
Oh, the root vegetables. So I'm not a vegetable gardener. And so there are some lettuces you can do. Things that go in the ground like radishes. You know, radishes come to mind, lettuce comes to mind. I can do a little homework and give you some better suggestions, but as you can tell, my garden failed supremely this year, and I don't really do winter vegetables, but I'll shoot you a couple suggestions. But it's usually the root vegetables that go in the ground. So
okay, we'll include that in the email.
Yep.
Again, everybody who signed up tonight, you'll be getting an email with a link to this recording, and then any other stuff that might come up like that, we'll drop in there as well. What about garlic, actually, just as an aside? Is it too late to put garlic?
Garlic goes in, I think, in October, so
Okay.
it's not too late.
Every year I say I'm going to do that. Any ideas for keeping critters from digging out my tulip and daffodil bulbs?
Well, it depends how complicated you want to be. When I plant, I put cayenne pepper around the base of the bulb, and then I cover the bulb up, and I put some of the same on the very top. You can buy packets of something called Squirrel Away or something like that, and really what it is a packet of cayenne pepper.
Yeah,
So
like plant food.
that.
Yeah.
There are more complex things. You can put your bulbs down and put very, very light screening above it, and then cover it with soil. The thing is that they will dig. So I just keep cayenne pepper handy and do that. And I try to move the squirrels from where my plants are to some other place in the yard. So I have these really funny squirrel things where I can put corn cobs on spinning wheels, and I have a little house for peanuts, and they're way away from my house. And so, you know, they're not that smart all the time.
Yeah.
And then speaking of cayenne pepper, birds don't mind it. So I mix cayenne pepper into my bird seed, and that keeps the squirrels away.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Huh. Is now a good time to prune back hydrangea bushes? We have a beast of an hydrangea, and it's pretty, but it's taking over.
Yes, now is a good time. You have to know your plant to know when to prune, because those shrubs that flower in the spring shouldn't get pruned back now, because you're going to cut the buds off. But this is a good time to cut hydrangeas back. I have hydrangeas in my yard that I generally leave up in the winter because I like the color of the seed head. But I will, and some hydrangeas bloom off old wood, some bloom off new wood, new sprout, some bloom off both. And so if you want to cut them back, I would cut them back again, 6 or 8 inches. And I would make sure that if there are any dead leaves in the center of these hydrangeas, that they're raked out, and then cultivate the soil around the base. And if you're a coffee drinker and you have coffee grounds, it's always a good idea just to add a little nitrogen to the soil with your coffee grounds.
Okay. And then when is the best time to cut back pollinator plants?
After they bloom. After they bloom. So I still have plants up. I have something called Liatris. I have great blue lobelia. I have red lobelia. My black-eyed Susans and brown-eyed Susans are still in bloom. And so I wouldn't cut those back until I absolutely have to. But sometimes early in the season, like my lamb's ear or my betony or my allium, after the bloom is spent, you can cut it back. But I do the easy thing. For things like daylilies or things that have really big floppy leaves, I wait until they get old and yellow, and then I can pull them out easily. But if it's a flower itself and the bloom is already spent, that's a good time to cut it back a little bit. Sometimes you'll get a second bloom. It depends on the plant.
Okay. All right. I've been collecting wildflower seeds and native plant seeds this year. Is it better to save them to plant in the spring, or can I sprinkle them in the yard once the temperature drops below 50?
I would wait till the spring, to be real honest with you. And if you want to give them even a better chance, you can maybe set them up inside the house under lights come February and get a little start there.
Okay.
But I wouldn't put them
Like
out this winter.
Yeah. Okay. I want to stop weeds from growing by putting down newspaper sheets in some areas, followed by soil, compost, and mulch. Is it the time of year to do that?
So it's the time of year to do that. No problem. No problem.
Yeah,
Just
we
know
can
that,
sleep. Yeah.
the newspaper is an organic way. It's not completely preventative like a plastic sheet would be, but it's very natural. And I think I've told this story before to some bungalow folks. I use that process to prevent weeds around when I was gardening around a client's garage in the city. But I used cardboard because cardboard decomposes quickly and it's really heavy. But what I didn't realize is that she lived off an alley and it attracts rats underneath the cardboard.
Oops.
So better to have shredded paper or newspaper as a weed screen. Yeah, so it's a good time of year to do it.
Got it. Good tip too. I have many bags of lawn soil. Can I use that to add to my flower beds with the mulch?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely use it. As long as it's lawn or garden soil. If it's potting soil, that really doesn't add any tilth or amend the soil in any good way.
Okay. Pick your brain about the difference between potting soil and the other bed soil another time.
Potting soil doesn't really have any soil in it. It's a bunch of malorganite and a bunch of other products, if you will, that allow for easy drainage and still provide the plant with some sustenance to thrive. But it's not like planting. It's not like the soil where you want all the organisms in the ground to do.
Got it. Got it. I'm like your best audience because I know nothing. I'm still like overly urbanized. It's all interesting and I love it. And I have little gardens, but I'm not entirely sure what that I'm going to get this question, but it's since it's late to seed, can I put it in the fridge? And I'm not sure.
If you have seeds that you want to plant next year, or bulbs, a lot of people can put them in the refrigerator just to keep them cool until next season. It's not uncommon to do that. Or you can find a cool place like a basement or garage. So yeah, you can keep them cool that way by putting them in.
Okay, great. I can't get rid of wild violets in the lawn. I've been using herbicide in the spring and summer, but they're still here. What can I do this fall?
Aside from cry after a long day of pulling weeds, they're invasive. They're invasive and they send runners underground. And so that's like creeping Charlie. It's one of those things that's incredibly difficult to eradicate. You can pull the violets out little by little, but there's really nothing except perhaps smothering that area over the course of the winter and replanting with seed in the fall, with grass seed in the fall. It'll continue to go. You can keep it at bay by pulling it out, but it's incredibly invasive.
Got to make friends a little bit. Yeah. Yeesh. Okay. I planted crown imperial bulbs last week. Is there anything special I should do to be sure it will grow?
I hope you're watering them. You still need to water. I've had a lot of rain here out south. If you have had rain in the city, that's great. But let's make sure that the ground stays moist for at least 14 days to give them a good start for next year.
14 days. What is a good top coat material?
I use a mulch that is finely ground and it's natural hardwood. That's what I use. If you want to create your own, you can take and make what we call leaf mulch, which would be taking dried leaves and chopping them up into teeny tiny pieces. An oak leaf is too heavy, but a maple leaf or some other kind of thinner leaf will do. The problem is if you don't cut them up really, really small, then they harbor mold underneath over the course of the winter. But that's how you can make your own. If you want to use compost, I would use something that like, I don't use cow manure or any sort of manure. I use a mushroom compost, a chicken compost, or a cotton ball compost. They're all organic, and they will serve its purpose well. I don't use cocoa bean hulls as a compost or a mulch. Cocoa bean hulls smell really great. They smell like chocolate, but if they're consumed by local cats and dogs, it's toxic.
Yeah.
Unless you don't like your local cat and dog.
Yeah. Italian. No, we have an unusual number of slugs this year that have been hard to control. Any advice as we head into winter? Well, there's 3 thumbs up on that one, so apparently there's been a lot of slugs.
Actually, they'll kind of go away come winter time, but I don't know where they are on your plants if you're finding them everywhere, but they like little hiding spaces, like underneath hosta leaves. And so the homemade remedy that I used that worked was I took a beer bottle and left a little bit of beer in it and put it on its side, and they crawled into those things. You can take little containers and do that as well. Then there's also, the name will escape me, but there's also a bag of stuff you can buy, which is like ground up eggshells, and use diatomaceous earth, it's called. You spread it down and the slugs move around and it cuts their bellies and they die.
Okay.
Those would be
I like the beer option, but
it worked for me, and I did it all along a border underneath my hostas. That's where I had the problem.
That's a great idea. I understand that tilling damages the soil structure. How deeply do you till? And also, thanks for a great presentation.
Oh, you're welcome. I go 2 or 3 inches, and there's a lot of research out there that says you really don't want to disturb the soil too deeply. That tends to apply to farm areas, because cultivating really deep is not good for the soil. I go down 2 or 3 inches just so that I know that I'm not dealing with clay or compacted soil, because I want my roots to be able to move about.
Yeah, I was always curious about that too. Both of my hydrangeas didn't bloom this year. Do you know why and what I can do next summer?
No, I don't know why. And mine didn't either. I was just talking to someone about that. Hydrangeas need the right amount of sunlight. They need airspace underneath it, and they need the right amount of nutrients. And I'll tell you what, I've done all of that. I've provided food, I've moved them, I've set them so they're in better places. And I have my native hydrangeas, which are called Annabelle hydrangeas, bloom just fine. But the ones that get the beautiful pink color in them, I think I had 2 blooms this year. So I wish I had an answer for you. I've done a lot of research on it, and the research says to do the things that I'm suggesting. And it's been, I have not been triumphant in that. So what I would do is make sure you have, 8 inches of space around the base of the plant, and it's not crowded by other plants. And if you want to use some sort of a plant food that's appropriate for hydrangeas, you can try it. And I wish you well, because I have been unsuccessful.
Okay. We're just about out of time, so some of these you've already kind of answered in other ways. We've got Creeping Charlie, frustration.
Creeping Charlie's like the violets, yeah.
Yeah, smother them. Eggshells keep bunnies from eating your tulips. They don't like daffodils. Plant bulbs under chicken wire, which I know you've talked about in previous things as a possible option. Morning glories, what are your thoughts? I let it go in some spots because it bloomed so nicely, but now it's spread and taken over everything. Should I rip it all out or not and let it come back?
That's up to you. They are incredibly invasive, incredibly invasive. And so they will, whatever, if you have anything you cherish in that area, they'll force it out and overtake it or wrap around it. So I like the look of morning glories. I don't plant them. I plant nasturtiums, which can vine and crawl. You can even use them in your salad, and they're not invasive. That was my solution.
Just a couple more. I have birds, doves and cockatiels. Can she use their poop papers as compost? Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. I know you don't want to use dog or cat, anything from a dog or a cat. I'll have to research that one. They use chicken poop, so I don't know why not. And it kind of depends. If the paper's on newspaper, I don't think that would be a problem. Okay, I was wondering, we always play that, like, is anyone going to stump Jackie with all the questions?
So,
close.
I would say if the base of the cage is newspaper, I would say that would be fine, but I'm going to check that one, Carla, and get back to you.
Okay, great. I think, well, we're out of time. It's 7:01. This is kind of a big question, so it's kind of the last, but I put various flower seeds, like I planted various flower seeds, but they didn't grow. What am I doing wrong? I know
it's always about the right plant and the right location. So is your soil healthy? Are the seeds old or new? If they're aged seeds, that won't work. Were they planted to the right depth? Do they have the right sun and shade? There's lots of things that fall into it, which is why if you're planting seeds, I often recommend starting them indoors so you can see little seedlings before you put them in the ground.
Makes sense.
But the most important is the soil good? If it's not good underneath, you're not going to get anything on top. Yeah.
And actually there's just one more. Is there a way to bring, is it Arborvitae back to life? Arborvitae, hers are all brown.
If they're, well, the way you check it is snap off one of the branches, and if there's any green inside the branch, then it's alive. But I'm going to guess that if it's all brown and you snap it, it's going to crack right off. Again, that's something that has to be, they're finicky. They have to be put in the right place and get the right amount of sun and water. So my guess is no. One of the things you can try if it's small, if you just give it a little yank and it comes out of the ground, it hasn't rooted properly.
Okay, yeah. All right, and just some people thanking you for your wonderful presentation, and we did it. We got through them all. Bravo.
Yep, I owe you a little information on root vegetables and cockatoo and dove poop. And I'll get that to you within the hour.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, and that'll go out probably next week. I think
Right.
I'll send the email out, with whatever else, including the link to this presentation tonight. Jackie, thank you so much. As always, always fun, always a pleasure. Yeah, great to see you, and I'm sure we'll have you back soon.
And happy gardening, everyone. I'm always open for emails, so if you have questions, just reach out to me. Thanks so much, everyone.
All right,
Good night.
thank you. Have a great night.
Good night.